What if I told you an entire 18-story metropolis is hiding right beneath your feet? Imagine just living your normal everyday life, totally unaware that a massive, ancient secret is resting right under your floorboards. Welcome to this cinematic explainer where we dive into a bizarre, accidental discovery that absolutely shattered our understanding of ancient history and human survival. Today, we're exploring a forgotten world built not toward the sky, but deep, deep into the planetary crust. A literal citadel of shadows. Section 1. The Secret Behind the Wall. Now, we aren't starting our story thousands of years ago in the Bronze Age. Instead, we're jumping to 1963, in the quiet, modern-day town of Derinkuyu in central Turkey, where a local guy is just doing some routine renovations on his house. You know, it sounds like a joke, but this incredible story actually begins with a homeowner trying to figure out why his chickens kept mysteriously disappearing. He noticed they were squeezing into this tiny crack in his basement wall and just vanishing without a trace. He'd patch up the hole and they'd find another one. Finally, he decided he absolutely had to see exactly where they were going. And this totally ordinary, almost comical domestic mystery ended up leading to one of the greatest archaeological revelations of the 20th century. So, frustrated by his missing flock, the man finally takes a sledgehammer to that basement wall to widen the crack. When the dust cleared, he didn't just find a missing bird or some forgotten root cellar. He opened a portal to a hidden world. A dark, hand-carved passageway stretched out before him, leading into an abyss that had been sealed away and pretty much forgotten for decades. That single hole behind a basement wall led to a staggering 85-meter-deep subterranean labyrinth carved directly into the earth. To put that into perspective, 85 meters is about 280 feet. That's the equivalent of a modern 25-story skyscraper, but built completely in reverse, plunging straight down into the darkness. But this wasn't just some deep, empty pit. What archaeologists found at the bottom completely defied logic. Section 2. A metropolis beneath the earth. As experts rushed in and started mapping the site, they realized this was no simple cellar or temporary emergency bunker. It was a sprawling, highly organized subterranean metropolis. They mapped out a dizzying 18 distinct levels, plunging deep into the earth. It was this crazy three-dimensional maze of narrow tunnels, steep staircases, and cavernous rooms. While only about 8 of these levels are open to the public today for safety reasons, the sheer scale of the excavation proves this was a monumental feat of ancient urban planning. Even more shockingly, this underground marvel was engineered to shelter an estimated 20,000 people at once. You've got to let that sink in. 20,000 people, alongside all their livestock, their pets, and massive food stores, all living together beneath the surface. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a fully functional, self-sustaining ecosystem designed for long-term survival. But all of this instantly brings up a massive mystery, right? If you pack tens of thousands of warm bodies, breathing animals, and cooking fires into a sealed stone cave, how do they survive? Like, how do they not just immediately succumb to toxic gases, smoke inhalation, and a total lack of oxygen? Section 3. Engineering the impossible. Let's dive into how ancient architects pulled off a brilliantly impossible life support system centuries ahead of its time. Because the builders of Derinkuyu weren't just digging holes, they were master geologists. It all starts with the region's unique geology. Millions of years ago, volcanic eruptions blanketed the area in ash, which compressed into this soft, porous rock called tuff. The crucial thing here is that this rock was incredibly soft, making it easy to carve out a massive city using just basic ancient iron tools. But here's the magic trick. As soon as that carved rock was exposed to the air, it underwent a chemical hardening process. This gave the massive chambers natural structural stability without needing any modern steel or wooden reinforcements. To keep everyone alive down there, they built a mind-blowing network of over 50 massive vertical ventilation shafts. Just think about the insane precision required to dig a shaft 80 meters straight down. From those main shafts, more than 15,000 smaller air ducts branched out like capillaries, supplying fresh air to literally every single room. Plus, they dug 52 deep water wells drawing from underground rivers. And here is the true strategic genius. These wells were completely isolated from the surface. Why? So invading armies above ground couldn't just drop poison into their water supply. That porous rock also acted as brilliant natural thermal insulation.
So whether it was a scorching summer or a freezing, snowy winter above ground, the city maintained a perfectly stable, cave-cool temperature of 13 to 15 degrees Celsius all year round. This natural climate control was absolutely vital, not just for keeping people comfortable in such a crowded space, but for preserving their massive agricultural surpluses for months at a time. Okay, so we know they could comfortably survive down here. But you really have to wonder, what on earth were they hiding from? Nobody puts this much back-breaking effort into carving an 18-story subterranean city unless the threat above ground is completely existential. What kind of terrors drove them into the dark?
Section 4, the 500-kilogram stone doors. Derinkuyu wasn't built for comfort. It was a desperate tactical stronghold designed for invisible warfare. You see, this region was a major crossroads of ancient empires, making it highly vulnerable to constant invasions and fierce persecution.
And their defense strategy was absolutely brilliant. At strategic choke points throughout the tunnels, they installed these massive, circular, rolling stone doors that weighed up to 500 kilograms. First off, they could only be rolled into place using levers from the inside. Once closed, they entirely blocked the narrow passageway, making them utterly immovable from the outside. And the scariest part? A central peephole allowed defenders to safely watch the enemy and thrust spears at anyone trying to break through. This design completely neutralized the power of massive surface empires. Any invading army was instantly stripped of its numbers advantage. They were forced to march single file, totally hunched over in pitch blackness, vulnerable to traps at every single turn. Meanwhile, the city's inhabitants waited safely behind impenetrable rock, fully supplied with air, water, and food in a maze they knew like the back of their hands. It was a deadly trap for anyone who dared enter. But you know, keeping the bad guys out is only half the battle. Think about this psychological toll for a second. Could an entire society actually live in total darkness for months at a time? How do you maintain your sanity, your social order, and your culture when you haven't seen the sun in months, just living in a perpetual state of twilight? Section 5. Life in the shadows. Well, to prevent absolute chaos among 20,000 terrified people, this underground ecosystem required incredibly rigorous, flawless social planning. The whole layout of Derinkuyu was highly rationalized. On the upper levels, they kept the livestock. This minimized how far the animals had to travel and allowed the toxic smells and methane to vent directly to the surface. By doing that, they freed up the middle levels for normal human life. Archaeologists actually found communal kitchens with ceilings still blackened by soot right alongside wineries and underground schools. And plunging all the way down to level 8, they built a massive cruciform church where the community could gather and maintain their faith in the dark. They lit this massive void by carving thousands of small niches into the walls for smokeless linseed oil lamps. They even kept their economy going, crushing grapes in underground wineries because wine provided clean hydration and crucial calories. And incredibly, Derinkuyu wasn't isolated. It featured a legendary 9-kilometer-long tunnel believed to connect it directly to a sister subterranean city, proving a vast interconnected network existed right under the feet of invading armies. Section 6. Who built the underground city? All right, let's solve the final mystery of exactly who carved out this impossible fortress. Because let's face it, something this massive naturally attracts some pretty wild theories. Look, while fringe theorists will sometimes loudly claim that Derinkuyu must have been built by extraterrestrials or lost ancient civilizations, the actual timeline shows a beautiful, multi-generational human effort. Initial carving likely began in the 8th century BCE by Phrygian architects using simple iron tools. Fast forward to the 7th century CE, and it was massively expanded by Byzantine Christians hiding from raids. It actually continued to be used as a refuge for centuries, right up until 1923 when it was finally abandoned. It sat totally empty and silent for 40 years, until 1963 when that fateful sledgehammer broke through the wall. Derinkuyu proves that some of humanity's greatest, most awe-inspiring achievements aren't always about reaching for the stars or building massive towering monuments. Sometimes the most incredible feats of engineering are built by burying ourselves in the dark, driven by the sheer, unyielding will to ensure our own survival. Derinkuyu might be the deepest, but it is just one of over 200 underground complexes discovered in this region alone. Which leaves us with one incredibly thrilling, kind of chilling question to end this explainer. If a 20,000-person city can hide behind a simple basement wall for decades, what else is waiting in the dark, right beneath our feet, just waiting to be found?